it depends on what state you're in, right? I mean, if you're in California right now, you want to make sure that you're getting the top talent from globalization of people to ensure that, you know, all of Silicon Valley, those engineers aren't going elsewhere, and they're very upset with Trump as a consequence. But if you're talking the Rust Belt and, you know, you're talking, you know, manufacturers where jobs have been going away, you're feeling much less good about global trade. But the one thing that, of course, Warren didn't say is that if you look at manufacturing, including the steel he's talking about, since 2000, 86% of the job loss in the United States is about efficiency. It's automation. It's AI. It's not about jobs going to China. And that's not something that Trump so far...
Where do you get that 86% number?
That number, I think it came out at Harvard about a week ago, but it was a well-known study that economists contributed to. It's been overwhelmingly over the last 10, 20 years, the gains that you're seeing have to do with not people moving from country to country. A lot of money and investment is going to come back to the United States. A lot of that is going to be jobless. And I just, so far, I don't see a lot from the Trump administration or from the Democratic side addressing that.
We asked the NAM about this last week on the show, and they argued, Tony, that automation requires jobs. You got to design the robot, you got to maintain the robot. The question is whether we're set up for that structurally, right?
Correct. And in the end, what we're talking about for the United States is a productivity, and because that's in the end what defines a change in a nation's standard of living. And forging changes in productivity require big changes in investment by companies, by governments, not only the federal government, but also by local government. And we haven't seen that. In fact, that's the weak part, the weak link in the recent productivity data. It's the stuff part. The amount of capital in place per unit of labor in the past year has actually declined for the first time since 1953. In other words, compare a company today of 100 people and perhaps has 50 computers. 5 years ago, it may have had 55 computers. So that's what I mean by a decline in capital intensity. That's what's occurred. So it's more difficult to get more production out of people in terms of goods and services because there hasn't been meaningful amounts of investment. So that's the key thing to focus on for the administration and, of course, the states. And
but he's making the point that automation has replaced the jobs as opposed to them going elsewhere for cheaper labor. But productivity hasn't actually mirrored that, then, is what you're saying. We would expect to see more productivity gains if that was the case, right?
Right, because there was a lot of hiring, of course, for a number of years. We've seen payroll gains of about 200,000 persons per month when the labor force has only grown about 100,000 persons per month. As that slows down, naturally, since the U.S. is closer to full employment, the productivity numbers probably will rebound somewhat. And you're right, David, the figures of the past 5 years show productivity growing only 0.5% per year, and the United States typically grows around 2%. So there probably will be a pickup, but to cause a change permanently in the trajectory on growth in productivity requires this investment I speak to.
I mean, Ian, one thing about you, you talk to a lot of foreign leaders. You're very plugged in globally. What is the rest of the world saying at this point? Are they just, is it wait and see mode, or are there measures being taken and precautions being taken in advance of any potential import tax or tariff retaliation moves from the U.S. on trade?
It depends on the leader, right? I mean, there's no question that the United States, irrespective of whether you think of Trump as being, you know, a massive protectionist or unilateralist or someone that's a threat, the United States is still the world's only superpower. And there are a lot of countries out there who are so dependent on the U.S. Japan for security purposes, for example, not to mention the Treasury's holding, Mexico because their entire economy is the United States, Canada, the U.K. because of Brexit, that when Trump says jump, they're going to say how high, how often. But there are other countries out there, thinking Germany and the continental Europeans, that have been strongly aligned with the United States, and now we're thinking, wow, this isn't going to work for us much longer. We need to do more ourselves in terms of defense. We'll see how real that is. We also need to work much more closely with Chinese and others on economics and on multilateral institutions and structure. So it's not like Trump becomes president and everyone just says, we're not working with the U.S. The U.S. has a lot of influence globally, but it is required. There are some major nerves among countries that feel like they do have choices.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.